traveling really does something to you when you really do it, because you don't try to change the place that you go. You're changed by the places that you go. And that's the difference between tourism and traveling. Tourism terraforms places to make the people comfortable by going there versus them going there and bringing something back with them, and their heart is also left there too. So most of my emergence has come through being with people, being with nature, and becoming more than who I am. As they say in yoga, the big S self versus the little s self.
Hi, I'm Rudy, and this is Voices of Emergence, a space where inner transformation meets systemic change. Today, we're joined by Ryan James Kemp, a systems futurist, a relational architect who walks with leaders through unlearning, cultural integration, and planetary remembering. Rooted at the confluence of quantum systems, indigenous wisdom, and regenerative design, Ryan cultivates spaces of relational transformation, where complexity becomes compost and clarity emerges through kinship. In this conversation, we explore how to reweave perception, tend systems in transition, and nurture post-growth ecosystems grounded in belonging and life-affirming possibility. Together, we'll sense into how relational intelligence and planetary remembering can guide us through this moment of systemic shift. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you very much.
So let's jump in. The first question we always ask to all our guests, when you hear the word emergence, what arises in your body?
An effervescent upward energy. Something that is phoenix-like rising from, I like the word compost, but it's really something rising up, but it had to be rooted first. So emergence only happens through soil, through entanglement, through groundedness. So there's an upward energy of emergence, but it simultaneously is rooting itself. So it's a dual process moving up and down. The elders talk about emergence a lot too. They say, don't focus on what's collapsing, focus on what's emerging. And it's not indifference to what's collapsing, but that's not where you put your focus. Because if you put your focus there, then you can't be fully present for what's emerging. And that's really the most important thing, because naturally what emerges utilizes the beneficial aspects of what is collapsing. Like the phoenix from the ashes. Yeah, it comes from the ashes. So it's entangled with them. So emergence is of what is collapsing and alchemizing that into something new. So all of this feels like this upward sort of toroidal washing machine type of bubbly, like San Pellegrino.
Ryan, it's good to see you. We've had some interactions before on Zoom calls, and yeah, I'm curious, how has emergence risen in your own life? Tell us a little bit more about your story and what were some moments of inspiration or some insights that shaped who you are and who you've become.
Yeah, thank you for that. I also want to bring in that most emergence comes from emergencies. The word emergency, we might think of ambulances and lights and things like this, but emergency means to bring to the light, etymologically from the Greek. So emergence often happens through emergency. And by emergency, we can say cracks where the light get in, to quote Leonard Cohen. But it's these moments of transversal nature where you're moving from one thing into another thing. And most of my life, all of my emergence has come from moments where I had to traverse and to travel. And I am a traveler. I've been traveling around the world since I was 20 years old, close to 60 countries, and basically nonstop for 14 years. And I'm not talking about traveling like going to Cancun or like things like that. Like backpack in the mountains of Nepal, in Ghana, kind of these different levels of traveling. So all of my emergence and who I am today has been shaped not only from my upbringing. I'm from an Ashkenazi Jewish and Irish background. I'm a European and a United States citizen and grew up in Massachusetts, north of Boston. So I have that kind of East Coast grit, but simultaneously this desire to continually explore and see what's beyond the conditioned way of life that I had been brought up in. And my emergence came from being shot out like a cannonball from Boston, first to Hong Kong to study Chinese philosophy when I was 20 years old. And I'd traveled to mainland China and to Thailand and Malaysia and different places. I then went back to Boston to try to go to school and encountered what some people call culture shock. I realized it was reverse lack of culture shock. So I then left and went to Spain, graduated university in Spain, and moved to Cameroon to a farming village named Balimionga when I was 22 years old on the border of Nigeria. And that really completely changed my life. Getting water from the stream in a jerry can, showering out of cups, killing my own chickens, taking Okada or the motorcycles down into the farming villages and drinking palm wine and learning about poverty, but also true wealth and happiness, learning about colonialism, learning about all these things, right? So that's an example where one world that I thought I inhabited encountered another world that I hadn't yet entered into. And when they merged, kind of how this happens with rainbows, when you have two rainbows, there's a third one that kind of comes above it. Some people call it the third space. In music, it's called the overtone. So this level of emergence kind of happens when these worlds for me would collide. And there have been many examples, like probably countless stories of how I could go into this. But there's been a lot. Traveling really does something to you when you really do it, because you don't try to change the place that you go. You're changed by the places that you go. And that's the difference between tourism and traveling. Tourism terraforms places to make the people comfortable by going there versus them going there and bringing something back with them, and their heart is also left there too. So most of my emergence has come through being with people, being with nature, and becoming more than who I am. As they say in yoga, the big S self versus the little s self.
Yeah, what an interesting part you have, Ryan, with all your travels. So all your travels also brought you to a lot of indigenous tribes, I know, and I would like to know, like, how did you get there, or how does the indigenous and somatic intelligences, if you wish, show up in your own path, and how did they emerge and how did they evolve also, and where are you now with that?
The first teacher, if I could call her that, or I'll call her a way shower for me on my travels. I met her up in the Larrakia country, up what's called Darwin, Northern Australia. There was a grandmother up there, and I'd been doing a social experiment in New Orleans where I was making bracelets and juggling and seeing if I could live in the streets of New Orleans as a social experiment. It was very interesting. So I had this skill of doing macrame, and I was making macrame bracelets up in Darwin in Northern Territory, Australia. And I met this grandmother there, and I had the same name as her son. So I gave her the bracelet. She took me in and taught me for a weekend, just her and I. And I was 24, and she started to share these things about the animism of the landscape and how her memory was stored in the land, and how if certain people harmed this tree in the town, the whole town is going to collapse, and saying these things about crystals and how do you bless the food and like all of this sort of stuff that I was just like, whoa, what is this? I'd never heard of any of this stuff. Really, it awoke something in me about the animacy of life, because I always just thought it was humans and nature. That's still even the vernacular, humans and nature, civilization and the wild. So she merged them for me in the first way that I can remember. And through meeting her, she kind of ping-ponged me to another grandma on Turtle Island up in Alaska. And I went there to I met her in the small island up in Alaska, and she started to teach me about the relationship with the people and the herring and the name of their group, and how the name of the people is always nested within the bioregion, nested within the function of the people within that. And I just continually started to see this kinship and this relationality, and where all the names actually meant something, you know? Like if you go around the United States, like most of the names don't really mean anything. What's Boston? That's a place in the UK. They even call it New England still. I asked my friends, you think that's weird? You still call it New England? You know, some of the names still mean something. Like Chicago comes from Shikawa, which means stinky onion, right? That was a place of where the onions are. So really the continual movement into indigeneity for me just opened up place and me as a part of that, rather than me as this exceptionalist organism walking on earth, that I can do whatever I want with her, that I can optimize all of this inanimate stuff for my own well-being, that I can even disassociate my own well-being from earth. So all of this sort of progress of reconnection or reassociation is really what I've learned through a lot of these elders and indigenous teachers, or the original people's teachers, is how to reassociate, how to remember, right? And I don't say remember as in the opposite of it is forgetting, because that would be too easy. Like, oh, let's just remember who we are. Like I lost my car keys or something. Remembering is an embodied physical process. So when you asked about this embodied cognition, remembering is a process where the opposite is dismembering. So to remember is to stitch yourself back into the tapestry of life, which you've never been separated from. But actually to do it, right? Because we all entered into life and we signed a membership agreement with our first breath in. The membership agreement is that we breathe back out in reciprocity. So one of my uncles said, if you don't like that membership agreement, try to not breathe back out. It's reciprocal, the agreement. So when we sign that membership agreement with life, we have to remember that there are other members of life. So the other members of life, we have to respect them, like a gym. You know? When you go into the gym and you have a membership with the gym, you don't leave the weights on the floor. You don't throw your Gatorade on somebody. You don't steal someone's water bottle or take the clothes off of their back. You have a membership agreement. So in the process of remembering this embodied cognition, we are literally stitching back together the members of the community that we are one of them. And that is the remembering embodied cognition process, which is called biocultural heritage, which is the state beyond biodiversity. Biocultural heritage is the knowing that human and nature are one. Not that we need to reconnect with nature, because that still means that I'm separate from nature if I need to reconnect with her. So biocultural heritage is a way to say human and culture and nature are one in that phrase. So that's really where everything's evolved for me, is working now in biocultural heritage, working now in kinship, working in animism, and bringing systems and science and spirit, revealing it back into one entity that it already is.
What you're saying reminds me of a book by David Abrams called Spell of the Sensuous.
Beautiful book.
Which is a beautiful book, which really marked me. And in there, he talks about how, I believe it's the Australian Aborigines, that as they travel the land, they tell stories. And so as they walk, to their destination, they remember things as they go through different landmarks. But if you put them in a car and you speed through the land, they get a little bit confused, or like it's going too fast, that they cannot tell their stories quickly enough because the car is going too quickly, of course. So they cannot tell fully the story of the land. And I thought that was really remarkable in our fast-paced society to think about, wow, well, these people, they really connect with the land in a deep way by telling stories as they go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds to me like you're talking about a re-enchantment of the world. Like, let's get enchanted again with nature and with peoples and with the stories. Let's develop a relationship there. And in this remembering, there's also a unlearning. Like we need to unlearn a bunch of stuff that we've been taught and ways we've been, kind of programmed to be in order to re-enchant with what it truly means to be on this planet. So yeah, how does that sit with you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. People can go to New Mexico, it's the land of enchantment. You just start there. But yeah, this re-enchantment is, Einstein talked about this, right? He said, maybe the most important human emotion is wonder, right? So even to step back and question something is extremely valuable in a society full of conditions that render us separate from the very thing that keeps us alive. So this re-enchantment process, this wonder, this praise, this gratitude of the living, it goes hand in hand with feeling, and I really like, Rudy, how you're bringing up consistently this, how does this feel in your body, this embodied, this word, right? Because two of the symptoms of modernity is anesthesia and amnesia. So the anesthesia is this numbness, right? You can't be enchanted with something if you're numb. If you don't feel, there's no way you're going to have wonder. So the amnesia is about who we are and where we come from. But the anesthesia is what I feel like you're touching into here, Alex. And part of the unlearning that we have to do is, as my teacher in Hawaii says, Kumu Ramsey, he says, you got to empty the coconut before you can put anything new in there. So, there's a Zen parable similar, right? Where the master wants the students like, I want to learn from you. I want to learn from you. And the master tries to fill the cup, but it just keeps overflowing. He's like, well, what am I going to put it in? Your cup's already full. So when we have all these preconceived notions, when our hands are closed to new input or to new information or to new ways of being, new ontologies or epistemologies, new ways of knowing, there's no way that we can ever know anything different. But we expect to know different things while maintaining our same way of knowing. And that doesn't make any sense. If you want to give me some food and I have food in both my hands and I'm like, yeah, where are you going to put it? I have to let something go to receive something else, right? Which is the whole principle of regeneration that I think gets missed very often. Regeneration is not this two-step process. Regeneration starts with a giving of something. And then you can receive something. And then based on what you received, then you can give something. Again, you don't give it back only, you give it forward. Everyone's always like, I want to give back. No, give forward too. So this enchantment, this wonder, this unlearning, how do you let go of something in order for you to bring something else in? And if you're able to do that to a certain degree, your perspective, your worldview will change. Not your mindset, but the thing is the worldview. The mind is set in the worldview. Like a fish in the ocean, if you ask it if it's in the water, I don't know if it will say yes. It's just home. So how do we let go of certain things to enable other things to come in? That's the art of unlearning. The best part about it is you get to keep what you want. You get to give away what you want. It's like the fire, when you're with the fire, you have to give something to the fire for it to keep burning. If you don't give something to it, like unlearning, if you don't give anything to the fire, there's no fire. It goes out. So the process of unlearning is really a process of giving something, which is really nice. It's not a state of scarcity or a state of loss. It's a state of giving. And I think that that's really important for people to know, because oftentimes they're like, oh, I learned so much. Like, it's like a sunk cost type of like mentality. It's like, no, you're actually giving that to fuel something else. That's evolution. That's regeneration, right? You give something and then you regenerate. So unlearning is really important. And that's actually probably one of the main things that I assist people with in reboots, and a lot of the other work that I do is emptying the coconut.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, in our work too, we have been working a lot with unlearning, and it's probably one of the most difficult parts also for many people, as we are in a society where there's a lot of polarity as of now. You can look at that in different ways, of course. But how do you see also, the way of what is happening in the world, the way we start all these processes to unlearn and relearn, and other types of polarities like masculine, feminine energies, like queer, more than human, playing in sensing emergence and cultural repair, things like that. So how do you personally embed it in your work, in your life?
Embed the polarity of transformation.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah. How do you work with that? Yeah. There's the part of learning, but it's a slow process. Yeah. But there's many other things that we can do, also shortcuts, psychedelics. So there's many people that try many different things.
Yeah.
But to me, one of the most important things is actually the integration. A lot of people do a lot of things, but they don't really integrate. So they don't really learn. And also because integration is also about the unlearning and then relearning. And how do I open myself to surrender actually to the beauty of life?
Yeah, there's something about how our identity is tied to the things we know. And so there has to be some kind of humility in unlearning and being open to new perspectives. And you also, from traveling around the world, you get exposed to new types of cultures. And so you have to let some things go in order to integrate these new things.
Yeah. If I want to change, right? Which I think is part of the whole situation currently is, do we want to change or do we want to change? So in order for someone to have humility, which interestingly enough has the same root word as human, and which is also the same root word as humus, humility, human, humus, all of these very entangled earthen, it's an earthen prefix. Yeah. So to have humility for sure is very important. Integration, interestingly enough, just means to become whole, right? The thing is, we already are, but we can't see that. This is part of why the work that I'm doing, I call it revelatory work. Not biblical revelatory, but it's revealing what's already there, right? Does a butterfly and a caterpillar, are those different, or does the process just reveal what was already imprinted in the blueprint of the caterpillar? When you heal, do you become something different, or do you just reveal more of what you already are? Right. So this process of unlearning, this process of integration is a process of becoming nested in everything that's already here. As they say, take care of the things that take care of you. So masculine and feminine, this is one aspect of the polarity, right? But one of my uncles, he describes it. He's like, to start a car, you need a positive and a negative charge in the battery. It's not that they're like one's better and one's worse. You should do this, you shouldn't do that. That's very like church nun hits you on the hand with a ruler type of binary thinking. But polarity maintains the tension that enables our intention to form. So through this polarity, through these things that are needed to create balance and equilibrium, that's how we move in the world. So masculine, feminine, these sort of energies, I mean, you could relate this to the different prophecies, eagle, condor, that's one small part of that prophecy. You can relate it to the patriarchy or the matriarchy. Really, though, those are about the patterns of feminine mother energy. For example, the matriarchy, it's not about women being in power. It's about the energies of the mother being the ones that guide the way the system moves, of the mater, interestingly, the same prefix as matrix. Everyone's trying to escape matrix, they don't know that once you escape one, you got to re-enter the other. You want to get rid of the shadow layer matrix? Cool. Now re-enter the mater, the mother matrix, because that's really the one that you have to re-enter. So there's stages beyond escaping the matrix, right? So really the balance of these energies, the equilibrium, not the equality of these energies, because men and women, they're not the same, more than human, we are and we're not, this oneness thing I think it gets people confused sometimes. Christopher Columbus, aka Cristobal Colon, aka the root word of colonization, this guy walked around the world talking about oneness. John Trudell says, first they came with crosses, then they come with crystals. So in what way are we attached to oneness that is homogeneous, that is ripping away uniqueness and diversity, versus having a unique unity, a unification utilizing diversity? So part of the way that I work with these energies is like, if you're in a forest, yeah, it's one, cool, but there's 15 types of trees, there's 30 types of birds, there's mushrooms, there's all these things, and it's still one. But the oneness isn't necessarily what you need to focus on. That's the field, that's obvious. To some that's obvious. But all of these energies, they're complementary. So this is part of the worldview that I work with Wahing Petopa, 4 Arrows. He wrote the book with Garcia Narvaez, Restoring the Kinship Worldview, and he has a beautiful chart. And on that is complementary duality. That's one of the kinship or indigenous worldviews. So that's a really important one, because positive and negative, they're complementary. Democrat, Republican, they're complementary. It's not binary thinking, black, white, this, that. They're both needed for coexistence, for equilibrium. So all of this feels like integration to me, because it's coming back to wholeness. But wholeness only happens through your own uniqueness, which is why social media can be very dangerous when you want to compare yourself to other people and then try to become something that you're not. Because now you're trying to play in the orchestra of the universe, playing a tuba when you should be playing drums. And you're not very good at the tuba, so you should probably play drums. So all of this is integration. Recognizing who you are and leading with that, knowing that who you are is made up of all of the systems that we're nested within. And that for me is a proper way to live, because you're then ensuring sustainability. Why? Because you're taking care of the things that take care of you. And that's the main process of sustainability. If we don't work with the water, we don't work with the air, we don't work with these things that we need, we don't get to be here. So stop making it all about you. Small s self. So all of this is integration. This is remembering. Not oh, I'm from Pleiades. That's not remembering. Maybe you're from Pleiades. That's great. Now what do you do? You're on Earth now. What are you going to do? And you're not even on Earth. You're with Earth. And I want to highlight this too, because one of my uncles, he's like, hey man, peace on Earth, is that a good thing? I'm like, I think so. He's like, nah, peace with Earth. Peace as Earth. That's integration. So all of these things, just by switching that little word in the middle, it's a different feeling. We're with Earth. We are her. Holotronic transformation, mirrored transformation, yeah? We don't see anything outside of us that is not already here. That's kind of the whole point. That's how our eyes work, like cameras. So part of what is really important is for us to never think that there is an outside, this inner-outer change. I'm going to change. What about the others? Ramana Maharshi, people ask him, he's a saint from southern India. He's passed away, transitioned, but The students asked him, how should I treat the others? He says, what others? How should I fix the system? What system? Nothing's there that isn't somehow embodied in us collectively. Let's stop this. That's another separability. That's another divide. Same as human nature, same thing. So I love the interchange. It's good to be able to specify, but never to separate. So this is all integration for me.
Right. You'll notice that I don't have any tubas. I have some drums. I'm not good at the tuba, but I do enjoy the drums.
I didn't even see that.
Yeah, I've been working with the djembe drum for a while, and it really opens up something. You get into a flow state. You have to get out of your mind.
Thank God.
And yeah, and when you do, the hands move by themselves to the right rhythm. And the moment you start thinking about it, you lose the rhythm. It's truly an amazing thing. At least that's my experience of it. I like this kinship worldview and like how it relates to the eagle and the condor, the rational and the heart, the masculine and the feminine, the individual and the collective, and how, you know, we're not alone on the planet. We belong to people, we belong to nature, we belong to the planet. How do we restore this kinship worldview? Is it through stories? Is it through archetypes? Does your work with Six Sun immersions or rebiz, how do you approach that?
Yes. I really like your questions because it's always yes. The word belonging, I like to highlight this. I really like words. Like they say, first there was the word. They say that in the Bible, but really there was a thought first, but let's just go with this. First there was the word. The word belonging, be, is a prefix from Old English that means to amplify. So belonging doesn't mean to be in a group. It means to amplify our longing for something. Like Rumi has this really beautiful poem called Love Dogs. I'm not going to recite it, but it's really beautiful. It's essentially, how do we belong to something? We amplify our desire to connect and become what we already are again, which is, we can call it the divine, we can call it nature, we can call it God. So yeah, we do belong, and we need to amplify our longing to connect again. These devotional, these bhakti cultures, right? This is one of the pathways to yoga, to yug, to union. Bhakti, this devotion, is one of those paths. One is karma, right? You serve the others so deeply, knowing that they are you, so that you become one. That's karma yoga. Maya, they would say, in laket, you are my other eye. Then there's jhana yoga, right? You can think your way, you can pit the mind against the mind. Good luck with that one. And then there's a Raja yoga, which is including Ashtanga, the 8-limbed path. But this belonging, this devotion, this devotion, it's tied to enchantment, actually. It's tied to wonder. So short story long, to bring it back into Sixth Sun. So the Sixth Sun is a time. Some of us may be familiar with it, but we're mostly on masculine linear time currently. We operate by the sun. Traditional culture is operated by the moon. They do overlap. The sun and the solar and lunar calendars overlap every 52 years. The moon calendar, since it was not linear, it was cyclical, there were different time frames, including ones of 5,200 years. That was called a sun. So the last time that the first sun started was 25,000 something years ago. That was the peak of the last ice age. Now 5 cycles of 5,200 years have happened, and we've re-entered into the first sun, which is also the sixth sun. And it's an opportunity, not a guarantee, for us to evolve with Earth, not separate from her. So the sixth sun Emergence is essentially focused on the evolution in solidarity with Earth, with the human as spirit embodied, working with cultures and different traditions, the medicines for those cultures that do work with them, and then applying that wisdom to systems. So how do we actually learn from these cultures, right? For example, I do work with different people who work with psilocybin or the legalization of psychedelics and lawyers and different stuff like this. But none of them know about the Mazatec culture or biocultural heritage. How are we going to integrate these worlds? You don't want to repeat things that have already been done 10,000 years ago, you know? Kind of like this framework, like the inner development goals, right? It's getting a lot of momentum. My teachers are like, yeah, we knew we had an inner world 30,000 years ago, you know? Then what? Like there's ways to evolve, not just maintain, not just survive, right? So Sixth Sun and Rebiz and all of these things, they work in this realm of evolution. They work in this realm of integration. They work in this realm of biocultural heritage. So the work really is almost similar to what you're talking about with the drums. You know, a lot of the elders, especially in ceremony, they're like, the mind, get that thing out of there. It's rotten. You have two other minds, the gut and the heart. And if you want to work with the earth intelligence, the relational intelligence, start from the ground up. You know, the gut and the heart, and then you can use your mind, the brain mind, right? So part of it is how do you actually start this shift of utilizing your other minds, your other brains, maybe the brain that's outside of you, visually outside of you, right? So Sixth Sun is about reintegrating, reassociating. And I use the word associating because most of what's happening now in the world is disassociative. People are disassociating from their bodies. People are disassociated from the places that they live in. Multinationals are disassociated from wherever they operate in. Everything is moving disassociatively, right? Biocultural says that the ultimate outcome of whiteness, not white people, but whiteness, is complete disassociation. We don't know where our tables come from. We don't know where our clothes come from. We don't know how to do anything. AI is disembodied intelligence. It's giving us solutions of how to live on Earth without actually living on Earth. Right? There's a disassociative movement. So all of these things, all of this work is unlearning, all of these processes, they're reassociative processes. They're bringing us back into entanglement, into interconnection, into a multidimensional lived experience of life. And yeah, with the immersions, I'm just really glad that I get to work with the elders and that they trust me enough to work with me. As they said, you must be doing something right if I trust you. I'm like, oh, phew, thank God.
Yeah.
But it's just really cool because I get to learn. That's what I want. I want to keep learning. I'm just like, I'm learning, you know, so I want to keep learning and share.
Yeah, I love the way you play with words also and how you give them new meaning or different combinations and all that. And I wanted to ask you a bit about some of the words that you use, like relational architecture that you use in you know, like leadership or design, or how do you use it, or why is it relevant now? And then other concepts like post-growth ecosystems, like how does that relate to the systemic redesign that is happening currently? And then the last one was about, but maybe that's another whole question, about the field attunement, which is also, to me, it's like consciousness is an energy, right? It's a frequency. Yeah. So, and then field attunement, like how do we tune into that? You know, like do that individually, but how do you do that in groups or in communities? So, yeah.
Beautiful. Glad we're focusing on the words too. Relational architect. So the polarity of relationality in current systems is transactionality, right? Transactionality has rights. Relationality has responsibilities. Transactionality has accounting. Relationality has accountability. relational ways of being operate in equilibrium, not in hierarchy. A lot of people try to have relationships with other people, but they want to control or dominate those interactions, and they quickly find that they don't have many relationships anymore. So the dominant, this is why it's called the dominant worldview, right? Power over, not power with, and then by volume. So relationality is also relativity, like Einstein, right? But also my uncle, he shared, everyone thought Einstein was so cool, man. Theory of relativity. We knew that already. Metakoye oyasin to all my relatives. Our language is quantum. Our language is relative. So relationality is relative. Yeah? It's animist. You can have a relationship with a bumblebee. You can have a relationship with the fire. You can have a relationship with the water. In fact, if you don't, basically, elementally, you're probably off, since you are made of those elements. So if you don't have a relationship with these beings that create all of life, I highly doubt that you're going to be able to be beneficial to life. Right. So this is actually the first question I ask anyone in Rebiz. I say, how many of you, I did it in a speech too in Prague for some like investors and all this sort of stuff. I gave the speech. I was like, how many of you care about the earth and want to help everybody? Oh, me. How many of you have ever said thank you to the water? Like you could hear a pin drop. Yeah. Okay, well, in Lakota, they say mini wachoni, water is life. That means they're synonyms. That means there's no life without water, right? Go anywhere in the world without water, let me know if there's life. Okay. So if you don't have a relationship with water, tell me how you could ever have a relationship with life enough to assist life. You don't even have a relationship with life. Mini wachoni, water is life. So let's start by building a relationship with life, because why are you trying to change something you don't have a relationship with? You don't even know her. You're trying to change her? It's like seeing someone at the bar. I don't know about those high heels. Who are you? I don't know you. Don't try to change me. We don't have a relationship. So relational, right? It embodies this field. Symbiotic, reciprocal, respect, reverence, all of these words, right? Hence rebiz. Architect, not the ChatGPT add-on, but we live in a scaffold of quantum ecology. They study it in CERN. They study it in these particle colliders and other sort of stuff like that. And they know that the architecture of the physical, visible world is built of the invisible. Yet, here we are in our work trying to fix climate and all these sort of things, focusing on the physical, visible world, forgetting the scaffolding and the architecture of the invisible, right? So part of the work I do with quantum systems revelation, part of this work that I do is to reveal the invisible built dimensions of the architecture of the quantum ecology of our physical world, which all original peoples knew, especially some when you got up like the mammals and stuff, they're like fully in the invisible. But, well, they're also here, but they work mostly in the invisible, which builds the physical. So this architecture is relational, where spiritual beings have a human experience. We have physical body, emotions, intellect, mental, cognitive, and spiritual bodies. They're all one, but you can specify them, right? So right now, this architecture that we have is flattened relatively into a singular dimension and is transactional. So the relational architecture is focused more on this, what I just expanded. Post-growth, a lot of people think the word post is temporal, meaning like it comes after growth, or like post-activism, like it comes after activism. It doesn't have to do with linear time again. It just means untethered to and open with other possibilities than growth as a sole metric of progress and success. And measurement, quantitative accumulation of value, right? Because most of the world, I think, as all of us for sure on this call realizes, the qualitative things often mean a lot more than the quantitative things. But in a world that utilizes quantitative metrics of measurement to deem value, that is creating progress towards destruction. So I never tell people that we're not progressing here. No, we're progressing, you're right, towards destruction. But if you want to progress towards something else, you can do that too. And to do that, we need to embody. We don't need to. It would assist us in embodying a way of valuing different things outside of a metric quantitative accumulation-based value set, which I think is really what post-growth is gesturing towards. Also, growth is one part of 4 parts of the life cycle. There's birth, there's growth, there's death, there's decomposition. The death and the decomposition parts were like, get away from us. Factory farms, get away. Everything, get away. Old people, lock them in a home. Funerals, bury them in the ground. All this stuff, just like get it out of here, right? But this is why the mushrooms are coming in, partially, or cosmovision place. They work on that energy. They're decompositional beings. The vultures too. Certain places where there's a lot of transformation happening, you see a lot of vultures. So post-growth, yeah. Growth is one part of 4. Why don't you just learn about all 4? And that's how life's created, because that's the regenerative. That's the way that life is created. But then I also want to add something too about regeneration and this post-growth thing. Regeneration isn't always good. Like a cancer can regenerate, right? Or as Biocultural highlights in one of the stories he tells about Prometheus. Prometheus stole fire for the humans and Zeus tied him up to a wall and an eagle would eat his liver every single day. And then his liver would regenerate. And then the eagle would come again and eat it. And then it would regenerate. So in what way would regeneration, and this is simultaneous with psychedelics, right? How are these functions and movements of energy being co-opted into the solidification of the citizen subject, of the productivity manual of modernity? How can we make sure that in whatever way we're approaching these things, they're not being repurposed into fuel for the machine? Because a lot of times healing can be like that, you know. In fact, psychology kind of positions us to maintain our healing so that we can become productive again. Productive for what? Are you sure you want to heal? You want to heal so you go back to that assembly job? Like, wait, why? So this is kind of where the meta relational intelligence comes in, which I think I might use in the description too. This way of popping out and having a different perspective on, are we sure that what we're doing is aligned with the life affirmative future that we want now? Because if it's not, and the future not being some linear space out in front of us, right? Because time doesn't go from the Big Bang to ancient Egypt to Jesus to Industrial Revolution, iPhone, apocalypse. That's not how time moves. If we're working on the future and we have a vision of the future, we have to have a vision of now. Because it's not outside, it's not ahead of us, right? So part of what this architecture is teaching us is that true visionary people have a vision of what's here. They don't have a vision of the future because that's not real yet. But there are dominant narratives on what that will be, but it's not here yet. And the past is not behind us. It's not yet done. And this is the 7th generational understanding, right? I'll call it the real one. That's a weird way to put it, but It's not just looking forward. That's disassociative. 3 generations before us, we're responsible for. We inherit epigenetically. They're proving this, right? We're here in the middle, and the 3 generations ahead of us, 313, that's 7. That's the 7th generation. As my teachers will call it, time-space cartography. Yeah. So all of these things, this is all packed into these words, except people would never have any idea that these are packed into the words, but I know that they're packed into the words. So if they're curious, they can always open Pandora's box with the words, but there's a lot in there because relationality is life. You're never not in relationship. Krishnamurti talks about this. Name a time you could ever not be in relationship. Even I'm in relationship with the computer, with the chair, with this light, with the wall, with the color of the wall, with the sun, you're always in relationship. So the architecture of relationality is how you must live in a world that is entangled, where you can't escape the matrix because you re-enter the other one. So, yeah, I'll say about that much for now.
Ryan, it's what you just said is so rich for me in many different ways. I'll try to weave different threads together. One thing is, by the time I was 11, I spoke 5 languages. I'd lived in 6 cities on 5 continents. My father was a diplomat, and back then the language of diplomacy was French. So he put me in the French school system. And French is a different way of relating to each other and to the world than English is. In certain senses, it's a more romantic language. It's more poetic in a different way than English is. And the language of diplomacy changed when English became the dominant language around the world. The language of diplomacy itself changed. And so I understand how language is important. And it always has occurred to me, that, well, if I live my life in Spanish or in French, or let's say something like German or Chinese, my relationship to life itself would be different because the way language structures the way we think, the way we talk to each other. But yet we have to pay attention that English right now is the dominant language. And so this also drives a lot of the way the world thinks. And I think that's just an interesting, observation to make.
Yes. Yeah. Really important observation too.
Yeah. You spoke about the Lakota, and I practice Vision Quest and Sundance. And these are very deep practices. It struck me how you were talking about water, and both the Vision Quest and the Sundance in the tradition I follow, there is no water for 4 days. It's a complete fast, no food, no water.
Yeah.
And the Sundance is a little bit physically draining because you're out in the sun and no water, and it gets to you. But this is interesting in the sense that in Eastern philosophy, there's Advaita Vedanta, which is a path of renunciation. You kind of like strip away the veil, you take away the Maya of illusion to get to reality or truth. And there's Kashmir Shaivism, which is a tantric way where everything we see is divine. And so we engage with the divinity of everything. It's a deeply embodied, engaged way. So it's not renunciation, it's actually participation. And it strikes me that in these Lakota traditions, you take away water to fully appreciate water. Like when you get that first glass of water after these ceremonies, there is such like a humble appreciation for the simplest thing, which is the most important thing, a glass of water, and therefore appreciation for everything else around you, the trees, the nature, the people, right?
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful duality, kind of a polarity of like taking away to then truly appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes when you have that first sip, you even say, "Oh my God."
Yeah, for sure. It's sacred. It's divine. And I also find I also like what you were saying about the 25,000 year cycle, which to me talks about the Yuga and how 25,000 years ago there was an ice age, and how now it seems like we are metaphorically frozen in an ice age through all these systems, all these structures, all these things that measure us in a million different ways. We're measured. There's a counting of everything. And so we're like frozen into this performance culture. In the Vision Quest, I had this productivity guilt. There I was in the forest, and I was feeling guilty for not doing something, not consuming or not working or not reading. I was just there, and I was feeling this productivity guilt. And I'm like, why am I feeling guilty for just being here in nature? Right? It's so deeply programmed that I should be doing something all the time. And so we're stuck in these systems of accounting. So it's like we're frozen and something needs to melt. Uh, Something needs to melt for something new to emerge, right? And so my question, and so this is really why Rudy and I are having this series, Voices of Emergence, because we feel the seeds of the future have been planted. So let's shine a light on them, you know? Let's speak to people like Ryan, who may have a vision of what's coming next. And so that would be my question to you is, what are the seeds that are planted? What do you see coming next? What is emerging for you?
Oh, beautiful share. Thank you. Part of what needs to melt is the ice off of our hearts. Some people say that's the grief. Yeah. When you cry, that's the ice melting off of your heart. So grief is a really important part of this work also, which is also praise, as Martine Prechtel would talk about. Grief and praise are one. Yeah. So everything you're saying about Vision Quest, I also Vision Quest. And yeah, it's very, very important. Like emptiness, right? In Buddhist tradition. Empty of what? Separate nature. So what's emptiness? Fullness or wholeness. Mindful, not my mind, like Finding Nemo. Mine, the seagulls, but mindful, embracing the full mind. That's a recontextualized understanding of mindfulness. That the mind is everywhere. As Carl Jung says, we don't have a psyche, we're in the psyche, right? So for me, what's next is a recontextualized, reassociated, reverent, respectful, reciprocal way of being with life. And those seeds, like you said, they're planted for sure. They're even already, people are eating them already, but there's some quote that talks about how the opportunity is not equally distributed. I don't think that this wisdom is equally distributed either, which is part of why I would now work with the Earth Elders as a cultural integration advisor. How do we actually distribute these seeds that are already bearing fruit and vegetable and herb and flower? How do we distribute these to people who live in barren food deserts of the mind? Monocultured minds, as Vandana Shiva would put it. So all of this is a recontextualized, reassociative, rooted, earth-centered kinship relational consciousness, where we don't continue to focus on the human as this isolated, exceptional being, but rather as the one who should learn to listen, the one who should be humble, the one who should make sure that they get their hands earthy, not dirty. One of my uncles is like, don't say dirty, man, say earthy. I like that so much better too. Said that to my mom once, she didn't get it, but she's like, oh, it's dirty. I'm like, anyway, but that's how I see things moving. So then there's a worldview that comes with that. And when you begin to embody the principles of the worldview to the degree where you renunciate the other one, naturally, not through force, I realized in my own path, renunciation never works if I actually don't want to renunciate the thing that I am trying to renunciate. Yeah, I won't drink wine for a little bit. Good luck. Glass here, glass there. I don't want to eat any fried fish. Yeah, okay. Whatever you want to renunciate. I want to go to the gym. Okay. Once you want to go to the gym, you'll go to the gym. You know? So once these things are embodied, once the lens is transfixed, then the principles will ripple through each and every part of the system, right? As well as the invisible layers being nurtured that are also feeding up into the physical visible layers that we have forgotten about mostly. So for me, applying the principles of this kinship worldview through all of the methodologies and functions of what I've just mentioned through the recontextualization, reassociation, all these sort of things, that was essentially the whole point of Project Tipping Point, which was part of Rebiz's offering, is building a narrative community around bringing the depth of the kinship worldview into practice through the various different nodes of humans in their functionalities, in their different positions in the world. Because I'm not an accountant, but if someone can really transfix the lens of kinship into themselves and practice it through their experience to the degree that they can implement that into accounting, beautiful. Tipping point, like you just do that and that's the tipping point, right? Because then everyone can start to do it in the way that they know how. That's their instrument, that's their tuba, that's their djembe. So then you bring that in. So for me, it's really this alignment process and then the pragmatic application of that through knowledge systems interfaces. So like the bumper sticker coexist, kind of like that. Let's just be able to receive and learn from each other's perspectives without attaching to them. But let's alchemize. Let's become what we really are, you know. Ram Dass called it polishing the mirror. So for me, all of these systems, it's about that. And it's definitely not about sustainability in its current corporate definition, which is like where most of my work is focused on all of these things. And then simultaneously seeing that the net zero stuff and all of this other reductionist sort of methodologies of how to make things better, that's the doorway. That's not the destination. Like the baseline of what we should be functioning with is sustainability. That's not the goal. That's the base. Like Maslow talks about this in his pyramid, right? He took the pyramid, for those of you who don't know, from the Siksika people, the Blackfoot Nation, and self-actualization at the top of Maslow's pyramid until he refined it as self-transcendence years later. Self-actualization was the base of the teepee, because you can't be a functioning member of society and of culture until you know who you are. But yet we're working our whole life to get self-actualized, and then we end up in the floor of the teepee. So we climb to the top of the pyramid, then you get to the floor of the teepee. So it's about the evolution, right? Not about the maintenance or any of these other things that the system is talking about. So everything, like I just said, like that, and about the evolution, because we're here to evolve. We're here to learn. It's a school. And if we don't learn the lesson in third grade, keep coming back. And I think the Buddhists called it samsara. That's it. Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, thank you, Ra, for Ryan, for your so much embodied wisdom and for this shower of new words and new meanings, you know, that we received in this, I think, a little bit over the hour. So
Yes.
yeah, so really, I really thank you. I knew you from, you know, distance a bit, but I didn't know that you carried so much wisdom. So I truly thank you for that and for sharing that with us. And I hope many more listeners also will be enchanted by that. And Alex, a last word for you?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan, for this such a thoughtful and like deeply embodied conversation, deeply relational conversation. I got a lot from it. So thank you for being here with us.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting this and wanting to bring these voices of emergence out, which you two are as well. So, I mean, it takes one to know one, you know, that's what they say. So thank you for doing what you're doing and your really thoughtful questions and for being beautiful humans on this path together. So mahalo.